Picture this golden moment in a developing economy. It's that exact point where absolutely everything is just clicking perfectly. You can literally feel the energy, the numbers are shooting straight up, and the future just looks incredibly bright. You look around and cities are booming, cranes are dotting the skyline everywhere, and workers are pouring in from the countryside looking for new opportunities. Factories are expanding at breakneck speeds, pumping out exports like textiles and electronics to the rest of the world. And honestly, the absolute best part of this whole phase? Millions of people are finally leaving poverty behind, incomes are rising fast, it feels like this unstoppable economic miracle. And then it stops. I mean, not completely, but that breathtaking, magical acceleration, it just vanishes. Growth simply slows to a crawl. Wages start to stagnate. The country's average income begins hovering around, say, $8,000, inching its way up very slowly to maybe $10,000, maybe hitting $12,000 per person, and then it just stays there for years, sometimes for decades. So that $10,000 mark right there, that is what economists call the middle income trap. And for dozens of countries and the billions of people living in them, it's the exact place where the climb to prosperity just quietly ends. Historically, the path to getting rich was pretty straightforward. Poor countries grew by doing something relatively simple, moving millions of workers off of low-yield subsistence farms and into high-productivity manufacturing. Think of places like China or Vietnam. That single shift multiplies a nation's output and drops poverty incredibly fast. But here's the catch. You can't just keep doing the same thing that got you here. That old model has some massive structural limits. See, in the early days, a country competes mostly on one thing: low wages. They attract global factories just by being cheaper than everybody else. But as those wages inevitably go up, that cheap labor advantage, it comes with a hard expiration date. Suddenly, they're no longer the cheapest option out there, but they aren't exactly the most advanced yet either. So they get caught in this brutal global squeeze. They're squeezed from below by poorer countries who can still offer way cheaper labor, and they're squeezed from above by highly advanced economies armed with massive capital, deep automation, and cutting-edge tech. Breaking into that top tier is incredibly difficult. Now, in the past, countries did actually have a way out of this squeeze. They upgraded. That's exactly how South Korea moved from basic textiles to cars and eventually to advanced semiconductors. But here's where the story gets much more surprising. Because today, that traditional tried-and-true escape route is fundamentally breaking down. It's a phenomenon that economists are now calling premature deindustrialization. Put simply, developing countries are actually losing their manufacturing jobs long before they ever become rich. Let that sink in for a moment. In the past, a nation's industry expanded, hit its peak, and only started declining after the country became wealthy. But today, the manufacturing path is disappearing earlier than before. Industry peaks at much lower income levels, and then it just shrinks. So instead of becoming the massive industrial powerhouses of the past, we're watching a jarring new reality unfold. Countries are jumping straight from agriculture into low productivity services. They're totally bypassing the factory floor and moving right into informal work, street retail, and basic services that honestly have virtually zero scalability. To make this concrete, just look at India. The expectation was always that huge factories would absorb all this massive surplus labor. But the reality is that millions of workers have moved instead into an informal service economy. We're talking small shops, basic transportation, low-wage urban gigs. Those sectors grow, sure, but they absolutely do not generate the massive productivity explosion that manufacturing once did. And this kicks off a devastating loop. You're stuck in low productivity, which means wages stagnate. Stagnant wages mean domestic demand stays super weak. Weak demand means local firms can't scale up. And if firms aren't scaling, investment slows down, looping you right back to low productivity. It's incredibly hard to break out of. Smashing through that $10,000 ceiling is now one of the hardest things an economy can do. It takes a total structural overhaul. We're talking high-level innovation, massively upgraded skills, rock-solid institutions, and heavily targeted industrial policy. You essentially have to rebuild your entire education system and fight on a global stage, all while your economic growth is already dragging. Because none of these issues exist in a vacuum. Weak human capital limits your ability to upgrade. Huge demographic pressures flood your labor markets, and fierce global competition squeezes whatever industry you do manage to build. These massive structural constraints overlap and reinforce each other to lock developing nations out. And if a country fails to make that impossibly hard transition, it doesn't collapse, it just stalls, quietly. Millions of people just get stuck waiting for an economic miracle that actually peaked years ago. So the big question for the global economy is no longer just how do poor countries grow? It's this: how do countries keep growing once growth gets harder? Next time, we're going to look at the dangerous lengths some nations go to when trying to bypass this exact hurdle, and how trying to borrow their way to the top leads straight into another powerful constraint: the debt trap. See you then.